Hey guys, there's an interesting Chinese curse that goes, may you live in interesting times. And we are indeed living in interesting times, Tommy, because not only is the auto industry in flux, a lot of electrification, but it's also kind of on the downhill slide of that traditional curve. So in this video, we're going to give you the top 10 cars that are living in interesting times because they are going away this year or soon.
Yeah, so these are the top 10 cars that have or will die by the end of this year, of course, 2019. So a lot of these cars are dying because, they're not selling, or they're being replaced by a new version, or maybe they're going electric. But let's just get right into the list.
Yeah, I think it's important to say that we've, of course, talked about cars that are going away, for instance, all of Ford cars for the most part, and a lot of GM cars. So these are not those cars. This is an entirely new list of new cars that are on the chopping block and we're saying goodbye to.
Well, the first car is somewhat one of those cars because it's the Ford Fusion, but more specifically the Sport. So this, of course, is the Fast Fusion, over $40,000, but with the 2.7 liter EcoBoost V6, over 300 horsepower. It's the sleeper, it's the Fast Fusion, and it's dying.
Yeah, there was a lot of interest in this car when it first rolled out. I remember going and doing a video on it. Everybody was super excited because finally a Fast Fusion. And now look at 2019, it's almost gone. It was very expensive, over $40K, but it had a lot of horsepower. 325 horsepower, 380 pound-foot of torque, which is a lot for a sedan, but I think it got caught up in the sedan to crossover switch, right? Everybody wants crossovers now, so instead of building this car, Ford is building an Edge ST. Go figure.
Well, and of course the Explorer ST. So this is the first Fusion to die. Next up on our list is the Buick Cascada. This is a car you probably forgot they built, but it's the two-door, four-seater Buick convertible that's largely based on a Opel.
2018, they sold 4,136. And I got to go on the launch of this car, which was actually not a scenic drive, but it was actually quite boring. We drove from Miami to Key West, which you'd think would be very scenic, but it's not. And it kind of represented the car, right? The car was actually built on a Cascada, which is a European four-seater convertible. And when you sat in the car, it felt like it was a European four-seater convertible in that it was relatively old. I liked the car, actually. I thought it was cool. I thought it was the perfect car for, let's say, a real estate agent in Phoenix, Arizona. It was kind of quirky. It was kind of different. Not a lot of four-seater convertibles right now, and I'm kind of sad to see it go. But of course, the writing was on the wall, I think, when GM announced that it was selling Opel. So once they sold Opel, there was no more Cascada. There was no more four-seat convertible in the Buick lineup.
Well, in my mind, this is really the writing on the wall. So the Encore, the most popular vehicle they built, they sold 93,000 in 2018 versus only 4,000 of the Cascada. So you guys are more into the tiny crossover than the tiny convertible. So number 8 on our list is another tiny car. This one even smaller. It's the Alfa Romeo 4C Coupe.
Yeah, the promise of Alfa Romeo in America was a dream that any car enthusiast longed after, and when it came, no one bought them.
Well, that's not true. In 2017, they sold 400, but 2018, 238. So they're way down.
Like I said, no one bought them, Tommy. Really cool car. It had that Italian quirky ability to be cool and yet completely impractical. And apparently in America, cool yet completely impractical is not something that sells cars. It was also expensive. We got to drive it a little bit. It lacked things like, a glove compartment, cup holders,
power steering,
a roof. It actually worked for the most part in the convertible. It was this wacky kind of cloth roof.
Well, hold on now, because they're still building the convertible.
Yes.
The Spider is still going to be sold. That one starts at $66,900, so they're only getting rid of the 4C Coupe. The convertible, however, sticking around.
All right, what's next, dude? Number 7 on our list is the Lincoln MKC.
Yep.
This was the first Matthew McConaughey Lincoln, which is, of course, referring to the commercial.
So the MKC is being replaced by the Corsair, and this has been a popular vehicle for Lincoln. It's largely based on the Ford Escape, but the new Corsair for 2020 looks way better. So it's going to join the Navigator, the Nautilus, and the Aviator. For some reason, Lincoln definitely took the advice of everyone and got rid of the stupid, 3-letter MKC, MKX, MKS, and they went for cool names like Corsair and Nautilus.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think sales will show that people like real names and not three-letter alphanumeric combination. Number 6, Tommy, we have Smart for 2, not just the car, but the entire brand.
Yep, so this was a brand launched in 2008, and here in the US they only sell one model, and it's fully electric.
Yeah, and how many have they sold? This year they've sold 1,276 of the all-electric Smart for 2. When they came in 2008, get this, they sold 21,000. Now, this is an interesting brand. It was started by the guy who basically invented the Swatch.
Yeah.
And then Mercedes bought them. It became a very urban car for tight European cities. You could park it butt backward into the parking space. It was so short. Made a lot of sense for little towns like Regensburg and, well, pick your tight European town. But here in America, not so much.
Yep, so they're still going to have the 2019 model, but it will die this year. Starts at $24,650. Of course, now Smart is all electric here in the States. 58-mile range, or 57 miles for the convertible, so not a lot of range in the one that's going away.
It had an interesting little side fact, and I'm going to let this fact be something that you guys can write in the comments below. Not the electric one, but the gasoline-powered one was one of only 2 cars that you could buy in America that were rear-engined. What's the other one? Number 5. It's going away again, Tommy, the second time.
Yep, so this is the Beetle. Now, the new Beetle was introduced in 1998. There were a couple of generations of Beetle since then, and it's one of the best-selling automotive nameplates ever, because they obviously sold 21 million of the original ones. They didn't sell quite that many new Beetles, not actually that many at all. In 2018, they sold 14,411 Beetles. For example, in 2013, they sold 43,000. So obviously you guys aren't out there buying Beetles. However, it was a really cool car, and they had a final edition as well. So it was kind of like a farewell version of the Beetle. Sad to see you go. But the good news is, looks like there's going to be another Beetle coming back eventually, but this time in EV form.
Yeah, you know, I loved the old Beetle, and actually didn't mind the new Beetle. I just felt they should have potentially put it on a cool platform that wasn't a copy of the Golf, but that had the engine in the back, like the first generation. I think that would have made it a much more long-lasting vehicle. But here's a question for you guys. This is one of the best-selling cars of all time, but in the comments below, let us know what is the best-selling car of all time. It's not the Beetle.
Yeah, people know that one, I think.
Well, we'll find out, won't we?
Easy one, guys.
All right, number 4.
Number 4 is the ATS and CTS by Cadillac. This is, well, it's a double bill, but these two are being replaced by the CT4 and the CT5 for 2020. And these are also really great cars that not a lot of people bought. The ATS and the CTS are super dynamically interesting cars. They're great performers, and now they're going away. Now, Cadillac has already released the performance numbers on the new V-Series cars for the CT4 and CT5, and they are way down on what the old V-Series cars were. So it's a new direction, but we'll see how it works out for Cadillac.
Because the V is going to be the new upper end, right? So they're kind of following the Germans again, in terms of having like an M that's not an M, or an AMG that's not quite an AMG, or an S-line that's not quite an S. All right, number 3, Tommy.
Jaguar XJ.
The current model looks great, but it's old, in production since 2009. I completely agree with that. You know, I think the XJ is probably the poster child for depreciating like a rock. The car just does not do well, and that has to do with Jaguar's reputation for reliability, or the lack thereof.
Right. So the top-end model has the big old 5-liter V8. It's a great-looking vehicle, but it just really isn't selling. So, well, the XJ as we know it is dead. But it looks like there's going to be a replacement, an all-electric version.
And I actually really enjoyed this car. It'd be one of the cars that I would seriously consider buying after 3 years they come off lease, because you can save a hell of a lot of money on it. And maybe it's one of those cars that I like more than you guys, because obviously people are buying it. But it's a really cool car, and it does combine that unique Jaguar ability to have a car that actually rides incredibly well and handles incredibly well. And usually those two don't go together. Usually a car that rides incredibly well is kind of sloppy when you start carving corners. But this car does it both, and does it well.
Right. Okay, and number 2, the Mercedes-Benz SLC. Of course, they had to change the name, but this is the SLK as we know it that came out in 1997. It's a two-door kind of compact convertible that Mercedes built for a while there. And they've launched a final edition to commemorate its production. And it was a really interesting, really fun car, but now it's gone.
This car, and actually the next one too, were kind of looked at like convertible lights for people who didn't really want performance convertibles. So a lot of like car enthusiasts said this is the car for the hairdresser, and I'm not sure that's true. I think this was actually a car, that slotted in below an SL, and yet at the same time brought a lot of kind of that open air Mercedes goodness in a much cheaper package.
Well, the thing about this one, though, is they actually did, like you say, have AMG versions throughout its lifetime, which were really fast, and this one is truly dead, so no direct successor has been planned, which is no good.
All right, and number one, ta-da! Perhaps the definition of Top Gear hairdresser car, the Audi TT, which actually was a really cool kind of Bauhaus design when it first came out. It was very round, right?
Yeah.
It had very unique styling. It, of course, had the issue that it didn't have a spoiler, and on the Autobahn it would tend to, get very tail light and fly off the Autobahn at speeds, which was not a good thing.
And even though this has got that reputation, it's actually a true performance car, especially the TTRS that has, the inline 5-cylinder turbo engine. So it's really quick, but it's not a great seller.
I got to drive this on the track, and I fell in love with it, the TTRS. It's one of those cars that I would buy in a heartbeat. My only problem with this car is that there's also an RS3, which has the same engine, which has more seats. But the TTRS, really cool car. I'm really sad to see this go. I had a long conversation with one of the engineers at Audi, and he said the very first version of the Audi TT that came out had so much stainless steel that Audi could not afford to build it today. It would just be too expensive. So if you guys want a really cool, really kind of way out there in terms of design vehicle that has more aluminum and stainless steel in it than you could afford to put in any modern car, this is certainly the one to get.
Now, this is another vehicle that looks like it's going to go electric in the future. Audi is planning all-electric models to replace their current lineup, and that includes a TT. So looks like there's going to be an electric TT coming.
So is there a 0 here?
No.
No.
There's no 0. That's 10.
And actually, this is a good piece of paper to show at the very end of this presentation because, like I said, may you live in interesting times, and we really don't know what's coming. We don't know if 20 years from now, Tommy, you'll be driving those little Woody Allen-like pod cars, or whether we'll still have, 1,500 or 2,000 horsepower Ford Mustang GT 600s or whatever it'll be called back then.
Well, let us know in the comments below what you think. As always, I'm Tommy.
And I'm Roman. And check out tflcar.com for more news, views, and of course,
real world cars that died reviews.
See you guys next time. Ciao.